It happened fast, a flicker, just a brief distortion in a video I'd seen countless times, not just me, but millions, billions, across the globe. This was the Apollo 11 moon landing footage, the widely distributed official version. I was deep into one of my late-night analysis sessions, sifting through the archived feeds, not expecting to find anything new. My work usually involves finding tiny inconsistencies, patterns, things most people miss. But this was different. This wasn't a pattern, it was a rupture. One moment, Neil Armstrong was taking those first steps, the American flag stiffly planted in the lunar dust, all as it had always been. The next, for less than half a second, something impossible appeared, a reflection. Not of the lunar module, not of the Earth, not even of Armstrong himself. It was a clear, distinct alien shape, something angular and metallic, far too large to be part of the landing gear, yet perfectly mirrored in his visor. It defied every known explanation, every law of physics we understood for that specific moment and location. My heart didn't race. There was no panic. Instead, a cold, calculated clarity washed over me. This wasn't a digital glitch, not a compression artifact. It was too sharp, too precise, too intentional. It was like finding a single, perfectly formed lie hidden within a mountain of truth. The anomaly appeared, stark and undeniable, then vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the familiar, pristine lunar surface. But the impression it left was anything but fleeting. It settled deep, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't an error. This was a cover-up, meticulously maintained, now showing its first tiny crack. I replayed the segment, frame by frame, then again in slow motion. The distortion was there, unmistakable, a ghost in the machine of history. For years I'd delved into the official narratives, peeling back layers of accepted truth, always sensing that something lay beneath. But this was the first time I had physical proof, however fleeting. It confirmed a deep-seated suspicion I'd carried since childhood. Some truths, it seems, refuse to stay hidden in the shadows, no matter how powerful the forces trying to bury them. They surface, sometimes as a whisper, sometimes as a blinding flash, demanding to be seen. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an awakening, a signal that the real work was just beginning. This brief, impossible reflection was a doorway, and I had just found the key. What lay on the other side, I couldn't yet say, but I knew with absolute certainty that it would change everything we thought we knew about that giant leap for mankind. The initial anomaly was merely the visible tip of a much larger submerged iceberg. This was the moment I stopped asking, "What if?" and started asking, "What else?" This was the moment the hunt truly began, leading me down a path from which there would be no turning back. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. My journey into these hidden corners of history didn't begin with that flicker on the screen. It started much earlier, in a childhood steeped in the promise of the future, yet shadowed by a growing unease with the past. I grew up in an era where technology was advancing at an incredible pace, where space exploration captured the imagination, but also where skepticism toward official narratives was becoming widespread. This was a time when the moon landing itself, despite its grandeur, already had whispers of doubt circulating, even among otherwise trusting individuals. I was always the kid who asked too many questions, not out of rebellion, but out of a genuine need to understand the mechanics behind the curtain. Why was that shadow so long? How could the flag flutter in a vacuum? These weren't accusations, just genuine queries from a mind that wanted logical consistency. My parents, bless their hearts, usually encouraged my curiosity, but even they would sometimes offer vague answers or simply dismiss my observations as childish overthinking. This early experience sowed a seed of distrust, a subtle understanding that sometimes even well-meaning adults would rather maintain a comfortable narrative than confront uncomfortable facts. This distrust deepened as I got older. I saw how easily information could be shaped, how stories could be told with carefully chosen omissions. It wasn't about malice always, but about control. Control over public perception, over national pride, over the very fabric of what we accepted as truth. This made me meticulous, almost obsessively so in my own pursuits. If I wanted to truly understand something, I had to peel back every layer, examine every angle, and trust nothing at face value. This analytical nature, which some might call pedantic, became my shield and my weapon. The moon landing itself was a monumental event for me, even though I experienced it through grainy reruns and historical documentaries. It was supposed to be humanity's greatest triumph, a testament to our ingenuity and courage. Yet, even as a child, something about it felt off. It wasn't a conscious thought, more a lingering sensation, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. The sheer perfection of it, the flawless execution, the unwavering confidence in every official statement, it pricked at my inherent skepticism. I admired the achievement, the brave astronauts, the scientific endeavor, but a small, persistent voice in my head always wondered if there was more to the story. This personal vulnerability, this deep-seated distrust of authority, wasn't born out of cynicism, but out of repeated instances where I felt misled, or where my intelligent questions were dismissed as trivial. It made me hypersensitive to inconsistencies, to the subtle signs that something was being withheld. I learned early on that institutions, while capable of great good, were also capable of great deception, often for reasons they deemed justifiable. This wasn't a flaw in my character. It was a forged resilience, a sharpened instinct. So when that inexplicable reflection appeared in Armstrong's visor, it wasn't just a random anomaly. It was a confirmation. It resonated with every unanswered question from my childhood, every dismissed observation, every quiet doubt that had accumulated over the years. It was the universe, or perhaps the universe's hidden truth-tellers, finally acknowledging the silent questions I had carried for so long. It was the justification for my relentless pursuit of truth, the validation of a lifetime spent looking beyond the surface. I wasn't just a researcher, I was a seeker, and the glitch was the beacon I had been unknowingly searching for. This wasn't merely a technological error. It was a crack in the carefully constructed facade of history, and I was uniquely primed to see it, to understand its implications, and to follow where it led. This moment didn't create my skepticism. It merely ignited the fuse of my lifelong conviction that some truths refuse to stay buried. The flicker in the video, that impossible reflection, wasn't just a confirmation for me. It was the final piece that connected years of accumulating questions, the realization that my intuition had been right all along. Even before that definitive visual proof, the official narrative of the moon landing had always felt like a story with too many convenient omissions, too many perfectly aligned details that defied the messiness of human endeavor. My childhood skepticism had grown into a more structured analysis as I devoured every available piece of information, and the cracks in the official story started to show themselves not as wild speculation, but as persistent, logical questions that were never truly answered. I remember delving into the early conspiracy theories, not the outlandish ones about aliens or hollow moons, but the ones that pointed to inconsistencies in the photographic evidence. The shadows, for instance. How could parallel objects cast shadows that weren't parallel on a flat surface? Or the lack of stars in the moon's sky, explained away by exposure settings, yet always nagging at the back of my mind. These weren't just minor details, they were fundamental elements of visual proof that, under scrutiny, began to unravel. The flag famously waving in a vacuum was another recurring point of contention. The official explanation spoke of a telescoping pole and a horizontal bar to keep it unfurled, but the images often showed creases and folds that suggested movement, not just a static display. These were the kinds of things that stuck in my craw, the small, almost imperceptible flaws that hinted at a larger fabrication. Then there were the conflicting testimonies, or rather the silences. Why were some astronauts so reluctant to discuss their experiences in detail? Or why did their accounts sometimes diverge on seemingly minor points? It wasn't outright contradiction, but a subtle disjointedness that felt unnatural for such a singular, monumental event. I spent countless hours poring over old interviews, audio recordings and transcripts, looking for those telltale signs of discomfort, of a story being recited rather than relived. The official narrative presented a unified, heroic front, but the human element, when allowed to surface, often hinted at something more complex, something less polished. The technical difficulties, Two always seemed a little too neatly resolved in the official accounts. The sheer number of challenges NASA faced, the unprecedented nature of the mission, and yet very few catastrophic failures or unexpected complications were ever widely discussed. It was always presented as a triumph of flawless engineering and execution. But anyone who has worked on complex projects knows that perfection is an illusion. There are always glitches, always unforeseen problems, always moments of near disaster. The absence of these messy, human elements in the public record felt less like a testament to genius and more like a carefully curated narrative. The psychological impact of these inconsistencies on me was profound. It wasn't just intellectual curiosity. It was a deep-seated sense of betrayal. As a child, I had been taught to revere institutions, to trust the narratives presented by those in authority, to discover that these narratives might be deliberately manipulated, even for what might be perceived as a greater good, chipped away at the very foundation of my understanding of the world. It made me question everything, not out of paranoia, but out of a desperate need to find something authentic to hold on to. This wasn't just about the moon landing. It was about the nature of truth itself, and how easily it could be bent, twisted, or entirely manufactured by powerful entities. This feeling of betrayal fueled my relentless pursuit. The initial glitch, that impossible reflection, wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of accumulating doubts, of unanswered questions, of a growing conviction that the official story was a carefully constructed illusion. It validated every sleepless night I had spent researching, every skeptical thought I had harbored. It meant I wasn't crazy, wasn't just a conspiracy theorist in the derogatory sense. I was a seeker of truth, and the universe had finally given me undeniable proof that there was indeed something hidden beneath the surface. This wasn't the beginning of my skepticism, but it was the moment my skepticism transformed into a mission. The cracks in the official narrative were not just visible, they were widening, and I was ready to push them open even further. The emotional environment around me became heavy, thick with the growing weight of my obsession. That flicker, that impossible reflection, it wasn't just a signal anymore, it was a siren call, pulling me deeper into the rabbit hole. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. My small apartment transformed from a living space into a war room, every surface covered with printouts, scribbled notes, and old photographs. I spent endless hours hunched over my computer, my eyes burning from the glow of old monitors, sifting through countless hours of archival footage. It wasn't just the famous clips, it was the obscure reels, the raw telemetry data, the forgotten interviews buried deep within digital repositories that felt like archaeological digs. Each pixel, each hushed word, was scrutinized for any anomaly, any deviation from the pristine narrative I had been fed my entire life. The process was grueling, a relentless grind that ate away at my personal life. Friends stopped calling, or rather, I stopped answering. Relationships frayed and then snapped, unable to withstand the constant pull of my investigation. My world shrank to the confines of my workspace, illuminated by the flickering light of old documentaries and the hum of my computer. Meals were often forgotten, or consisted of whatever I could grab and eat quickly without breaking my concentration. The isolation was profound, a self-imposed exile driven by the conviction that I was on the brink of something monumental. I felt like a lone explorer in a vast, uncharted digital ocean, searching for a single hidden island. The antagonist in this unfolding drama wasn't a person I could point to, not a shadowy figure in a trench coat. It was far more insidious, more pervasive. It was the vast, almost sentient force of the official narrative itself, a construct so deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness that it felt like reality. And behind it, the powerful entities protecting it, silently guarding a truth they deemed too dangerous to reveal. Every dead end I hit, every missing document, every conveniently corrupted file felt like a deliberate act, a subtle pushback from this invisible adversary. It was like fighting a ghost, a powerful, organized ghost with limitless resources and an unshakable hold on history. I started to feel the weight of ridicule, even without directly encountering it. I imagined the sneers from mainstream academia, the dismissive articles in established media, the condescending tones of experts who had built their careers on upholding the very narrative I was trying to dismantle. This intensified my feeling of being an outsider, a fringe element, a lone voice whispering inconvenient truths into a hurricane of established facts. It was a heavy burden, knowing that if I ever did find something concrete, I would be met with scorn and disbelief, not validation. The world wasn't ready to hear what I suspected, and the forces protecting the official story would ensure it stayed that way. But this pressure, this isolation, this silent battle against an unseen enemy, it only solidified my resolve. Each obstacle became a challenge, each moment of doubt a spur to dig deeper. I learned to read between the lines of declassified reports, to spot the subtle edits in archival footage, to hear the unspoken truths in carefully worded testimonies. My analytical mind, honed by years of skepticism, became a finely tuned instrument, capable of detecting the slightest tremor in the bedrock of established history. I was moving beyond mere suspicion. I was entering a phase of cold, hard data collection, each piece of evidence a tiny victory against the overwhelming tide of the official story. This period was the peak of emotional suffocation, a time when the pressure of my quest threatened to crush me. There were moments of despair, late nights where I questioned my own sanity, wondering if I was chasing phantoms. Was I just seeing patterns where none existed, a victim of my own ingrained distrust? But then another flicker, another subtle inconsistency would appear, pulling me back from the brink. It was a cycle of doubt and renewed determination, each turn pushing me closer to the edge of a breakthrough. I knew, with an almost religious certainty, that the truth was there, waiting to be unearthed. I just needed to find the right shovel, the right key, to unlock the hidden file that would shatter everything. The breakthrough arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper, an almost accidental discovery buried deep within a digital archive I had almost given up on. After months of dead ends, of sifting through corrupted files and intentionally vague documents, I stumbled upon a subdirectory labeled Project Nightingale. It was tucked away in a corner of an old government server, a server that was supposed to have been decommissioned decades ago. But somehow, some ghost in the machine kept it alive. Accessing it was a nightmare of outdated protocols and security layers, each one designed to deter, to frustrate, to make you simply walk away. But I didn't walk away. The sheer effort put into hiding it only intensified my resolve. When I finally broke through, the contents were sparse, almost anticlimactic at first glance. A few low-resolution images, some fragmented audio files, and a single encrypted text document. The images were grainy, showing what looked like a film set, but the details were disturbing. Props that were too realistic, backdrops that mimicked lunar landscapes with uncanny precision. The audio snippets were even more unsettling. Muffled voices, technical jargon, and then a clear, unmistakable command. Cut. Reset for take 2, and for God's sake try to look more surprised this time. It was a director's voice giving instructions, a director on the moon. But it was the encrypted text document that truly shattered everything. It took weeks to decrypt, using every piece of software and every coding trick I had learned over years of digital archaeology. Each character slowly revealed itself, forming sentences, then paragraphs, then an entire chilling narrative. It wasn't a confession, not directly. It was a detailed operational plan, a contingency, a backup. A plan for what they called lunar stagecraft, outlining the precise methods for creating a convincing lunar landing scenario on Earth, complete with special effects, choreographed astronaut movements, and even a schedule for broadcasting live footage. It detailed the psychological impact studies, the public relations strategies, even the names of key personnel involved in the elaborate deception. The document wasn't just about faking a landing. It was about creating an entire illusion, a grand spectacle designed to achieve specific geopolitical objectives. It spoke of the Cold War, the space race, and the desperate need to project an image of American technological supremacy. It outlined the risks, the immense resources required, and the layers of secrecy that would be necessary to maintain the illusion for decades. It even included protocols for discrediting anyone who might stumble upon the truth, labeling them as conspiracy theorists or unstable elements. Reading it, I felt a cold dread spread through me, a chilling realization that went far beyond mere suspicion. This wasn't just a few manipulated photos or a glitch in a video. This was an entire infrastructure of deceit, built with meticulous planning and executed with breathtaking precision. My deepest suspicions, the nagging doubts that had fueled my obsession for so long, were not only confirmed, but dwarfed by the sheer scale of the revelation. It wasn't a small lie, it was a fundamental rewriting of history, a collective delusion that had shaped generations. The document described how specific elements of the live broadcast were pre-recorded, how certain anomalies were intentionally introduced to create a sense of authenticity, and how the entire narrative was carefully crafted to evoke specific emotional responses from the public. It even mentioned the glitch I had found, describing it as a minor technical error during a broadcast splice, an oversight that was quickly corrected, but nevertheless existed in some archived copies. The impossible reflection wasn't impossible at all. It was a brief, accidental glimpse behind the curtain, a flaw in their otherwise perfect production. This wasn't just a turning point in my investigation, it was a turning point in my understanding of reality. The cycle of doubt was broken, replaced by a terrifying certainty. The powerful entities protecting the official narrative weren't just guarding a secret. They were actively maintaining a lie of colossal proportions. The weight of this knowledge was immense, a crushing burden, but also a fierce validation. I wasn't just a seeker of truth anymore, I was a possessor of it, holding in my hands the undeniable proof that a foundational historical event, one that had defined an era, was nothing more than an elaborate, meticulously staged performance. The game had changed. The weight of that truth, the undeniable proof of lunar stagecraft, settled on me like a physical burden. It wasn't just information, it was a living thing, a monstrous secret that now resided within me, threatening to consume everything. Fear, sharp and cold, became a constant companion. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every unexpected sound made me jump. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a glass cage. Every window a potential vulnerability. Paranoia wasn't a choice. It was a natural reaction to holding knowledge that could shatter global perceptions and expose powerful entities. The meticulous planning outlined in the document, especially the protocols for discrediting anyone who stumbled upon the truth, echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition. I knew I was now a target, not just of ridicule, but of something far more sinister. My phone, once a tool for connection, transformed into a source of anxiety. Unrecognized numbers, faint clicks on the line, the subtle delay in calls connecting. Each anomaly fueled my growing unease. I found myself instinctively checking my surroundings, scanning faces in public, always feeling the unseen eyes of my implied adversaries. I started taking circuitous routes home, varying my routines, a constant low hum of vigilance thrumming beneath my skin. The document had mentioned unstable elements and conspiracy theorists as labels to be applied to those who challenged the narrative. I could almost hear the whispers, feel the machinery of discreditation beginning to turn, even before I had uttered a single word publicly. In this suffocating atmosphere, a cryptic email arrived, its subject line a string of random characters. It was from an address I didn't recognize, but the content sent a jolt through me. Be careful what you dig for, some graves are best left undisturbed. There was no sender name, no way to trace it, but the message resonated deeply with the explicit warnings in the lunar stagecraft document. It was a warning, undeniable and chilling. This was not just a random internet troll. This was an ally, one of those who offered cryptic warnings, confirming that I was not alone in sensing the danger, nor in knowing the truth, or at least a part of it. Another message followed, this one more direct. They know you're close. Don't underestimate their reach. It came from a secure, encrypted messaging app I had installed months ago, on a whim, after a particularly unsettling deep dive into government surveillance programs. The sender was anonymous, but the information was too specific to be a coincidence. This was another ally, someone on the inside, or at least close enough to the inner workings of the powerful entities protecting the official narrative to understand the stakes. Their warnings, though vague, were potent, adding another layer to my already heightened sense of vulnerability. It wasn't just me against a historical lie. It was me against a system designed to protect that lie at all costs. The cultural dynamics of how such a truth would be received in society became a constant, agonizing thought. How do you tell billions of people that a cornerstone of their collective history, a symbol of human achievement, was a meticulously crafted deception? The immediate reaction would be outrage, disbelief, and then, inevitably, anger directed at the messenger. I envisioned the headlines, the talking heads dismissing me, the public outcry. The document had detailed the psychological impact studies, outlining how easily the public could be swayed by authoritative voices and how quickly dissent could be marginalized. The official narrative wasn't just a story, it was an identity, a shared memory, and attacking it felt like an attack on the very fabric of society itself. This realization intensified my sense of isolation and danger. The profound psychological effect of realizing that a foundational historical event, one that had inspired generations, was a fabrication, was immense. It wasn't just intellectual, it was existential. My entire worldview shifted. If the moon landing could be faked with such precision and maintained for so long, what else was a lie? What other truths were hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed narratives? The world suddenly felt less solid, less real. The betrayal wasn't just of me or of the public. It was a betrayal of humanity's aspiration, of the very idea of progress. This wasn't merely about exposing a historical wrong. It was about confronting the fragility of truth itself, in a world governed by powerful, unseen forces. I held the key to unlocking this uncomfortable reality, and the weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable. The burden of that knowledge, the gnawing certainty that I held the key to unraveling a global deception, propelled me forward. I knew I couldn't keep this truth to myself, even with the looming threat of powerful entities protecting the official narrative. The arduous process of preparing to release my findings began. This wasn't about a dramatic reveal. It was about meticulous, undeniable proof. I spent weeks, then months, structuring the evidence, cross-referencing every detail from the lunar stagecraft document with the archival footage, the leaked interviews, and the anomalies I had discovered. Each piece of the puzzle had to fit perfectly, forming an unassailable case against the established truth. My personal workspace, once a place of quiet contemplation, transformed into a war room, covered in printouts, timelines, and annotated documents. The consequence for the antagonist, the official narrative and its protectors, was clear in my mind. The slow, painful erosion of public trust. Not an explosion, but a persistent, corrosive drip that would eventually wear away the facade. I envisioned a future where people would look at the iconic images of the moon, landing not with awe, but with a critical, questioning gaze. This wasn't about destroying a legacy, it was about reclaiming truth. I understood the magnitude of what I was doing, the potential for global upheaval, but the alternative, silence, was no longer an option. The betrayal of humanity's aspiration, the very idea of progress, demanded a reckoning. My strategy for disseminating the information was carefully planned, anticipating every possible backlash and attempt at discreditation. I wouldn't just drop a bomb and run. Instead, I would present the evidence in a series of logical, digestible segments, building the case incrementally. I knew the initial reaction would be ridicule, dismissal, and accusations of being an unstable element or a conspiracy theorist. The lunar stagecraft document had laid out their playbook, and I intended to use that knowledge against them. I would release the initial findings through secure, decentralized platforms, ensuring that even if one channel was shut down, others would pick it up. My anonymous allies, though silent, had given me enough clues to understand the ecosystem of information dissemination outside mainstream control. They were my unseen support system, offering a glimmer of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. I prepared for the inevitable smear campaigns, the character assassinations, the attempts to discredit my research. I had already faced years of being dismissed as an outsider, so the prospect of more ridicule didn't faze me as much as the threat of something far more sinister. The vague warnings from my allies, "They know you're close and don't underestimate their reach," were constant reminders of the danger. But the weight of the truth I carried was heavier than any fear. This wasn't just about my personal vindication. It was about laying bare a fundamental deception that had shaped generations. The ending I envisioned wasn't one of universal acceptance. I knew that challenging such a deeply ingrained historical event would be a long, drawn-out battle. It would be a definitive public challenge to the established truth, a crack in the foundation that would allow others to see the light. It would spark debates, investigations, and a re-examination of history. Not everyone would believe, not immediately, but enough seeds of doubt would be planted to initiate a slow societal questioning. The era of unquestioning acceptance would begin to wane. Looking back at the journey, from that initial flicker in the video to the mountain of evidence I now possessed, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. It had been a solitary, often terrifying path, but one I wouldn't trade. This wasn't just about the moon landing anymore. It was about the nature of truth itself, about the enduring power of human curiosity, and the inherent skepticism that drives us to question what we are told. The world would never be the same for me, and soon, I hoped, for many others. The lie had been maintained for decades, but some truths, however deeply buried, simply refused to stay hidden forever. And I, the meticulous analytical individual with a deep-seated distrust of authority, was ready to finally unveil it.